And today, most of the day will be, we will have roundtables. Although in the first block, the cultural soil as cultural heritage, we have to reduce a little bit the program because we have another presentation that couldn't be presented on Saturday. So Eduardo, you are in the screen. And we will start this roundtable with a presentation of Edoardo Costantini. You know who he is. And please, Eduardo, start, and then I will try to moderate this roundtable.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's a real pleasure to be with you, although remotely. I hope that you can hear me well and you can see my screen. Can you?
Yes.
Okay. So I have been given the task of presenting a lecture and giving some ideas for questions for the roundtable. I don't know if I will be able to stay with you all the time on the roundtable, but I will try to do as much as possible. So first of all, the presentation. The presentation is about the possible policies and actions to protect the soil, cultural and natural heritage. I have hinted last Saturday about the strategic goals of the strategic plan of the IUSS. The first one is improvement of soil awareness. And this presentation is all about tools to improve soil awareness that we can follow. First of all, I want to point your attention to the fact that we all know that there are many attempts to protect the rights of man, animal, trees, nature. But I wonder, are there soil rights? So can we envisage some right for soil? We have to start for the global situation, as you know, according to recent scientific reports, the areas of the world where the low impact of the man on soil are continually shrinking. As you can see in the uppermost map, the areas are basically limited to the desert areas. Desert areas and some areas in the equator, while many areas are threatened with extinction, especially the areas which are more intensively cultivated. Then another context that is more on fashion currently is the concept of soil health. But I wonder if it is a real right of soil or just an utilitarian concept. If we take into consideration what is reported by the European Soil Mission in 2020, the focus of soil health is on the ability to sustain life. And the soil health is defined as the continued ability of soil to perform ecological function for all forms of life. But if we look at the European Soil Strategy of 2021, the focus is on human needs. And in particular, you will see that there are several ecological function that the soil is supposed to provide, from food biomass to water regulation, biodiversity, carbon sinks, and others. But I just wanted to point your attention to two services who are relevant for us. That is and service number 1, provide cultural services for humans and physical platform for their activity, and constitute an archive of the geological, geomorphological, and archaeological heritage. These two ecosystemic services are beyond the utilitarian ones. But I want also to address your attention on the fact that we also should consider and respect the soil not only for its services, but also by itself as one of the manifestations of the nature. We all know that every soil reflects in natural condition the environmental factors, the so-called factors of pedogenesis, and the soil itself is capable of self-organization, resulting from forming processes which derive from external and internal factors. We all know very well this concept. So that means that the soil is a natural body, and possibly it could be protected with some rights. But there are soils like paleosoil that have very little ecological services in terms of production, for instance, like this one. With this beautiful paleosoil has been completely sealed by urbanization, while this other soil cannot stand any longer current form of life because it's completely buried. But for us, it's very important because it carries a lot of information for our studies. Then we have also non-material values provided by soil. For instance, this soil from Germany, which has been used to produce iron from iron concretion, was inspiring an artist who made these sculptures made by the combination of soil material, wood, and spurs made out of iron. And this sculpture was very much appreciated also at the international level. So in the literature, we can find 8 criteria that has been using for highlighting the cultural and natural values of a pedosite, that is either a soil profile or a pedolandscape. The scientific evidence of past environments has provided paleosols, as I showed you, but also interest related to the culture, soil classification, representing the main taxonomic unit, but also the benchmark of main regional types, the soils that exemplify rare or natural or anthropogenic processes, pedological evolution models, including toposequences or catenas. Then there is the archive of geological, geomorphological, and paleontological and archaeological heritage, which is also acknowledged by the European Union. And another criterion is the ecological value of soil in a delicate environmental balance, such as soil that contribute to the outliving of a fragile ecosystem, relic situation, wildlife refuges, and biotopes. Historical cultural interest, such as that of soil characterizing a well-defined agricultural landscape, like soil of human terraced landscapes, for instance. And then there is another criterion related to social and economical characters, for instance, when it is possible to attribute to a specific soil the production of excellence and peculiar food, such as the soil of outstanding terroir. Then there is the recreational, scenic, and aesthetic values, including soil that contribute to the amenity of the landscape and with the colors. And finally, inspirational, religious identity, ethnical, and ethical relevance. These 8 criteria have been used by different authors to highlight the cultural and natural values of soil. But what about the policies? Policies for the conservation of this cultural and natural heritage of soil. So we can find some policies at the global level, the World Heritage List, the Biosphere Reserves, Geoparks of UNESCO, but also the Sustainable Development Goals point to some extent to these values, and the FAO Sustainable Soil Management. But all of them, as we will see, are not specifically related to soil, but some aspect of soil. Then there is, at the continental level, the European Soil Strategy, with the programs on research and innovation, which foresee the valorization of this value. And then the Soil Health and Food Mission, and the concept of soil literacy, which can be very useful for us to be exploited. I will show you later about that. Then there are some European conventions, that one of the European landscape, the conservation of European wildlife and natural habitats, and the Nature 2000. And then there are several policies at the national level about cultural landscape, archaeological sites, and rural landscapes. I will show you some examples. So first of all, at the global level, we have the World Heritage Site of UNESCO. We can find in this list of sites the terroirs of Burgundy, and in the description of these terroirs, you can see that soil characteristics are deemed to be functional for the expression of the quality of the wine. The only place where the soil is valorized by itself is the World Heritage Site of UNESCO tentative list for typical Chernosiomes of the Baltic Steppe in the Republic of Moldova. This is the only case at the global level where soil is valorized by itself as a natural body, but it is still in the tentative list of the World Heritage Site. A major tool that could be explored by us is the Biosphere Reserves of UNESCO. The World Network of Biosphere Reserves cover all major representative natural and semi-natural areas, and it spans over a surface of more than 7 million square kilometers in more than 130 countries, almost the size of Australia. And all these biosphere reserves are under the sovereign jurisdiction of the states where they are located. As you can see, they are scattered almost over the world. These are very important tools because they are conceived as learning places for sustainable development. In this list, there are also networks made on ecosystemic basis, and this ecosystem should provide valuable insight into sustainable development models and climate change mitigation and adaptation possibilities. So you can easily realize that soil perfectly fits within this concept. And this network are related to different broad ecosystem, from drylands to mangroves, to marine, to mountains, from savanna to tropical forests and wetlands. And as you can see here in the bottom, there is a process for this for designation and review of these reserves through the UNESCO. So you can look at it and try to find a way to insert soil in this list. Another list is the International Geoscience and Geoparks Program, always led by UNESCO, where you have already 195 geoparks in 48 countries. As you can see, there are a distribution which is rather uneven and should be completed. especially for Africa and Asia. In this list, there are some soil, and this soil should be site or landscape of international geological significance, managed for protection, education, and sustainable development. So in this tool, in this policy, a key point is the visibility of the site. And it is possible also in this case to submit to UNESCO a proposal for a new global, for a new geopark for the global level, but also to introduce soil within the current geoparks. Then there are the European policies, and among the objectives of the European Soil Mission, there is the increase of soil literacy in society in all member states. That means the policy is aimed at having the basic tools needed to think about soil processes, and soil relevance in broader terms than merely utilitarian. This is very important because, as you have seen, most attention is given on the soil function more than on the cultural and natural value of soil. But soil literacy tell us that also this basically teaching activity is very important for the concept of soil health maintenance in Europe, at least. So in conclusion, I will just say you that there are still no specific action for the protection of cultural and natural values of soil at European and international level, unfortunately. But the importance of soil characteristics is reported in several cases present in the inventories of natural and cultural heritage. For instance, the need of protection from soil erosion, and making explicit the cultural and natural value of soil improves soil awareness, soil literacy, and gives greater interest and motivation to the protection of the landscape. And my recommendation is that we must try to include soil cultural and natural values in policy already set up for the protection of the natural and rural landscape at the global, mainly, but also continental and national levels. And if you want to have some more information about this topic, there is this publication that I issued. It was issued last year by Geoderma Regional. And as for the question for the roundtable, I just wanted to draw your attention about these possibilities. In which countries are there paleosols that are recognized and valued as natural and cultural heritage? So there are already in place attempts to valorize this cultural, natural aspect of soil. And how are these paleosols valued? What specific aspects are prioritized? And then, are these paleosols typically integrated with natural and cultural preserves, such as geoparks or biosphere reserves, or do they exist as independent exhibitions? Finally, I want to tell you that the IUSS provide a stimulus fund to support various activities, including projects. And a question that I leave to you is, should this fund be also used to promote the official recognition of soil site as component of natural and cultural heritage? My answer is yes. So I am deeply in favor of investing for a project aimed at promoting the natural and cultural heritage at the different level, for sure, starting from the global one. So I leave you with this question for the roundtable. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Edoardo, for this interesting topic that we can start to discuss. So probably what we can do is try to combine the questions or answer each question. I don't know if we have to follow an order, but I think that we all have ideas about this topic. Maybe we can stop the slideshow, Eduardo, to see who are with us in the Zoom. So many people. Are there anybody that is there? No.
We have 4
No.
participants.
4.
Yeah. Only 4 people. No.
4 people. Okay.
All right.
So probably we can start with some thoughts about this issue, about the paleosols as a source of heritage. For instance, for me, it's clear that we have to move and we have to take actions to prevent that our paleosols are destroyed. Because every day the urbanization and constructions or even the extraction of materials are destroying our soil. And even we do, because for instance in Tlaxcala, you know the site with wonderful paleosols. And every time that we go there, we destroy a little bit more the profiles. So what do you think? I think that in Russia, you have at least one site that I know this, Kursk, yes?
Yes, and actually it's, for my knowledge, it's the only one, but it was a very nice example. And actually Svetlana Sychova, who have been working with this object for something like 20 years, probably 30 years, she struggled a lot to make this monument as a state natural reserve, geological one. It was written that it's not paleosols but geological reserve or something, and it means they have some regulations restricting the sort of activities, because it was in the quarry. It was something like a clay quarry or something, and there is a spectacular soil sedimentary sequence. You've seen it, Peter. Have you been? Yes. Alexander Quarry, yeah, in Kursk, yeah. Yeah, it's really very beautiful and has great importance because it's one of the most complete Pleistocene sequences at least in Europe. So it has great scientific meaning and contributed a lot to understanding of quaternary Pleistocene environment. And yes, it was finally established as a reserve. Yeah, but I do not know other examples in Russia, probably. I don't know, probably there are some, but I don't know.
I don't know. In Mexico, we have no site with this. Please, maybe, I don't know if Eduardo and the others can hear you from that place, but let's try.
I'll come up here.
Yeah, okay.
So I think in the areas that I work in the US Great Plains and Midwest, there is unfortunately a lot of suspicion of any kind of initiative to set aside areas for conservation, especially if the government is involved, some level of government's involved. That can quickly turn into kind of conspiracy theories about taking land, unfortunately. But there are ways that we could kind of work around that on our own initiative. And I know many years ago, I wrote up some material on the Brady soil for the Village of Brady website, which that's the source of the name of the Brady soil. So I talked about what it means kind of in layperson terms. And it was up on their website, on their village website for many years. And then I think some new administrator came in and said, we don't need this, and got rid of it. But I'm working on still in an early stage, but something similar for an area in southwestern Nebraska where we've done a lot of research, a website that would talk about our concept of how the landscape and the soils have evolved over time and what that means. And there's actually, I know there are people in the area who are interested. There's one member of a really influential local ranching family that is very interested in the Brady soil and knew a lot about it when I first talked to him. He's also really interested in archaeology and brought in some archaeologists from the Smithsonian to give a talk in the village of Juanita near our site. So we're trying to develop kind of material online that people can be pointed to and maybe go there and give talks on it based on that. But we did what we call a design challenge this spring where students interested in cartography and visualization brainstormed for a day about how to create animated sequences of how the landscape evolved and so on. So still a lot of work to do on that. It was lots of dead ends that we came up with. But I think things like that will work for making people aware of soils in general, but also even paleosols, which they don't normally hear about, right? Like NRCS or people like that.
Yes, Curtis.
Eduardo, I have a question, and it pertains to the geoparks. And the map that you showed, there were zero geoparks in the United States. So what would be the first step to try to establish geoparks in a country? Would the first step just simply be to go to the website, to the UNESCO website and geoparks, or do you have any advice on how to establish a geopark?
Well, as far as I know, there are geoparks all around the world established in recent years. So it's a rather new initiative of UNESCO. It's more recent than the bioparks. So it's just because of the specificity of geoparks that a new list has been created after the biopark, the biosphere reserves. So, of course, there is the need to combine specialists from different disciplines. I have contact with colleagues from Spain who managed to have these geoparks approved by joining effort from geologists, geomorphologists, and soil scientists. And of course, there is the need also to involve local authorities because usually these geoparks are maintained either by local authorities or by non-governmental organizations like WWF, World Wildlife Fund, or we have in Italy a fund for environmental areas. So either public authority or non-governmental organization should have the responsibility of maintenance of the geoparks. The geoparks are not preserved. This is very important. So everything go along in this geopark as usual. So there isn't any restriction. They can be, but it's not mandatory because the main aim is to present the outcrops of geological interest, geomorphological interest, or soil interest, as I showed you before. So the most important things, as I pointed out before, is visibility. So you have to prepare an exposure which is well maintained, well accessible, with yes, safety measure, of course, and this exposure must be maintained. And the combination of different aspects is an asset. So if you are able to combine different geological, geomorphological, and pedological outcrops, it is much better than if you want to apply just presenting geological or geomorphological issues. Apart from really exceptional outcrops, for instance, there are some, for instance, in Italy, there is an outcrop where you have the sedimentological demonstration of the dinosaur extinction, in central Italy. But apart from this very exceptional site, a geopark is meant to collect different places, possibly close one to each other, relatively close one to each other. Of course, the closeness in Italy is much different from the closeness of United States. So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the initiative is rather new, relatively new, and so if you are already prepared to have this good collaboration in between geologists, geomorphologists, and soil scientists, I think that you have a good possibility to success, because as I told you, I have a recent success experience from Spain. I can give you also the reference papers if you like.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, I know that in Mexico we have now 2 geoparks, and they combine the information from soil, geology, even the culture of the region. And one is in Oaxaca, that is rich in cultural remains with pre-Hispanic artifacts and so on. And the other one is in northern Mexico City, where there is a mining, this is a mining area that has been exploited during many years since Hispanic colonial time. And they, but this is a forest. So these 2 geoparks are different, quite different, but they presented the proposal and UNESCO accepted. And we have one geosite that this is something different, that this is the Actung-Ha system, that is the underground water system, the longest underground water system in Yucatan. Please, Cesar.
Yes.
If you can't hear, please tell us.
I will go closer.
Okay.
Yes. So it is true that we have many national parks. We have even geoparks, for example, in Poland, and we have a lot of information about soils in those areas. And we know they are beautiful, diversified, and so on. But typically, people believe that soil sections are unstable and are not displayed as, for example, geological sections. And even in our national parks and geoparks, of course, you may show to students beautiful examples of rocks, of, as I told, geological sites, but soils, similarly as animals or some plants, are displayed only in museum close to the national park as conservated sections, monolites, or something like this. Yes. So, but where is the problem? Really, the soils are unstable, soil profiles or such sections are unstable, or maybe we did not pay much attention to preserve them, to look for them. And maybe the problem is that we did not have idea that we should do it. And thank you very much, Edoardo, for this idea, because I think it may be a kind of impulse for us that we should review all points where, for example, sedimentological sections are already protected and described. Maybe we should, for example, in Poland, review all such places, visit them, and check if we can also display soil section in the same place as the first step. Add respective information, spread this information by media. It would be probably the easiest as a first step. And I feel it, we did not check it until now, but I feel it is possible that we can combine information about rock, about soil, and give, as you told, special attention also to soil, not just as soil and vegetation, something, but soil as maybe not first, as the second, just after the geological section, geological information. So thank you very much for this initiative. I discussed after our Congress last week with our colleagues, and probably we start this idea maybe in winter. As I told, we start with reviewing of geological sites which are already open, exist in Poland. Maybe they are useful also for our ideas, and we will use this support from IOSS when talking with local authorities or owners of the areas, because this is sometimes the largest problem, to add something, to change something, but we will try. Thank you very much for this concept, for this idea.
You're welcome.
Please.
A quick response to those great ideas from Cesare, and also Eduardo's really good explanation of geoparks and issues connected with them. There's a geopark that's been established for more than 20 years at the Lochuan Lus section in China, which is a spectacular sequence of paleosols. And that's great. I mean, there are big signs on the superhighway outside of town. It's used as a tourist attraction. But as Cesare said, these eroding Lus slopes are seen as a real problem in the Lus Plateau. And so trees have been planted all across the geopark just in the time since I first went there. And you can no longer see the Lus exposures. You can no longer see these beautiful faces with paleosols on that were the point of preserving the site. And so that's a really clear case of where more like input is needed on what's so important about these sites and how not to hide it in the interest of conservation.
Yes, please.
So I can understand the reluctance in many countries of putting land into parks and preserving it and taking away a lot of common uses and things like that. But it's not the only way we can, I think, protect soils. And one of the first jobs I had when I graduated was as a soil conservator, and I was doing land use capability surveys. And I don't know if that still exists today.
It does in the US.
Yeah. So you identify the value of the property or the land based in part on its soil properties. And so soils that are highly productive get the highest zoning, and they should be the last soils you should ever consider building on and doing other things like that. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, in preserving particularly our most valuable soils in terms of production, is through zoning. And maybe that's where we need to put a bit more emphasis in terms of education to local bodies and places like that about the real importance of soil, because they tend to think it's just like rocks, it's always there. Of course it isn't.
Yes, I think that you say something very important, because when we try to convince authorities about this conservation and preservation of the resource, they just think about some of the money issue, that is agriculture or maybe farming or cattle or something like that. But not when you say that this is history. And then I think that we have to be probably more aggressive in this issue to say all soil deserve to be protected, not only when you have value, money value, I mean. Eduardo, you returned.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, but apparently there was some internet problem. Yes, I think that one way to increase the appreciation of our effort is to highlight the threatening from extinction of soil, because usually also within our community of soil scientists, not paleopedologists, I mean soil scientists in general, because paleopedologists are more aware about the unicity of soil. There isn't the convention that soils are recurrent. So if you lose one soil here, you will find a similar soil elsewhere. But this is not always the truth. I think that we should compile a red list of soil threatened by extinction at the global level, or at least at the continental or starting from the national level. Because if we will have this red list of soil threatened by extinction, maybe we can join other efforts, for instance, to combat the extinction of animals or of others living bodies, plants, and so on. Do you think this could be feasible?
Yes, I think so. I think that if we, but for me, it is difficult to think about, because sometimes when you listen to people who are protecting the vaquita marina, the marine sea, I don't know the name in English, you can be like the Greenpeace people. So these policies should be very scientific, very clear, and we have to start to create these policies, I think. Peter, you want to say something?
I have some random things to say, Edoardo. And just as a follow-up to what Bruce said, property rights is a really big thing in the United States, and trying to come in and develop parks can be very contentious. And Joe was speaking to that as well just a few minutes ago. But early on when we started, are there examples of soil preserves or even paleosol preserves? There's two that I can think of in the United States. Out in Northern California, there's the Hans Jenny Pygmy Forest Preserve on coastal marine terraces in California, and that's set aside specifically to preserve those soils and the vegetation. And actually in Wisconsin, there's the Ice Age National Scientific Reserve that preserves the buried soil at its terminal Pleistocene age, the Two Creeks Buried Forest. And they actually refer to it more as the Two Creeks Buried Forest, but in fact, there's a podosol profile that's buried in lake sediments sandwiched between glacial deposits. And it's preserved in part because it's a good record of the end of the Ice Age, but also the very first radiocarbon ages on geological materials came from logs preserved there.
I have two of them on my desk.
Yeah, we all have chunks of these. And then one last thing, and this is again sort of random, I'm just responding to things that have been said. The soil just doesn't get a lot of appreciation, at least in a lot of English-speaking countries. Soil is only held in interest and in reverence when you're talking about like nationalistic sorts of things, like they made it back home to home soil and things like that. Otherwise, it's just dirt. And this was pointed out by Francis Hole in one of his books years ago. It has to do with the English language. And in Spanish, you do not use the same word for soil as we do for like how we might dirty our pants or what is on the floor. Whereas in English, all things get lumped into dirt and soil as being basically the same thing, when in fact they're not.
Yeah.
And then the last thing was, there are some mechanisms, and this is a follow-up to that, to preserve soils, but usually the only thing that gets attention, or mostly that gets attention, are vegetation or geological things. For instance, in Wisconsin, and I think all other Midwestern states, and maybe all 50 states, have things that they would call like state natural areas or state scientific areas that are preserving either some representative vegetation community or animals or maybe geological things, but I'm not aware of any. Are you where they're preserving soil features as
They're
part of.
preserving distinctive soils in many of those.
Yeah. And it may be a sort of like a sub-bullet in terms of rationale for why they're preserving this, but usually it's named for some plant or animal community or some geological outcrop that's there. So it's not lost, but it's not in the forefront, and I don't know how we do it other than to beat the band a little bit more. That's all I have for now.
Bharat?
Yeah, just I want to come to the experience we had in Iran after this initiative idea of the World Soil Day in 2015. That had a very good outcome, and every year celebrated World Soil Day, and even authorities were kind of forced, because there were letters, there were contacts from FAO, also IUSS. Then they distribute this to all these provinces. In each province, the authorities distribute this to the universities or governmental, let's say, organizations. Then we had a joint World Soil Day in all the provinces, and also one in the national level. So I think that was a very good success, at least for short term. But the idea of geopark, I think it also can be connected this World Soil Day events. And there will be initiative also contacting, especially those countries who really need some funds. This stimulus fund would be really helpful. Just an example, for instance, in Northern Iran, in Golestan, we had a couple of conferences and international colleagues. They suggested geopark there because there were plenty of things to visit. This paleosols, also the black soil, Chernozems, they should be protected. They were there, and a very important source of food, producing food. Also, there are natural Hyrcanian forests, and also a lot of geological hazards or things. Also good to know, people get too aware of that. So I mean, this could be also guided by this IUSS, FAO, or World Organization, UN even. Thank you.
Before Bruce, Edoardo, do you want to comment something about this?
Yes, I just wanted to say that we all know that every soil has a story to tell, but some soil have a more important, more relevant, more outstanding story to tell. So I think that I know that it is difficult, but we should try to prioritize the value of the soil. We cannot just say, okay, this soil is important for this and that. We should also try to classify the relative importance of one soil to another, so to really highlight the most important site of the world in this sense. And it can also be related to the biosphere list, because biosphere is more related to places where there are species in danger of extinction. And if we are able to highlight soil we are really threatened by extinction, we should include this site in the biosphere list, not only in the geopark list.
Okay, Bruce. Okay.
And Sergey.
Goryachkin, please.
I think that this initiative is very interesting, and I think that we should support this initiative at the umbrella of IUSS. And I think that somebody from our commission, so geography, can take part in this work, because we need just to make assessment what soils are in different kinds of reservoirs, because it could be the situation that some soils which are endangered, they are out of reservoirs. And for example, we can have a lot of podzols or cambisols under, for example, mountainous reservoir. So I think that if we can include somebody from soil geography group, it will be very, very useful to make such assessment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sergey. I think this is important that commissions are involved in this task. For instance, also Paleopedology Commission has something to say about this. Bruce?
So I think one of the things that people have alluded to here today is the fact that most people don't know much about soils. I mean, they wouldn't know it if they tripped over it for the most part. I think in the year of the soil, I forget when it was, a few years back, the Smithsonian Institute did this fantastic display of soils. Apparently it was very interactive. It was a fantastic educational exhibition. But it's probably locked up in a cupboard somewhere now, so nobody gets to see it. It would be nice maybe if the commission decided to support a traveling show of something like this around the place to help get people a bit more aware of what soils are and what the importance of them are, because they really don't think about it.
Yeah, and concerning the Day of the Soil on 5th December, I think that many of us are involved in initiatives of divulgation and to present something and doing different activities for people to know what the soil is and how to protect the soil. But I think this is another story, because this is just to create conscious, but we have to move to policies of protection, but not only in terms of degradation or rehabilitation, but the strategies to protect our memory.
But you have to have the people behind it. People have to understand that the government is spending money to preserve soils.
Yes.
If they don't understand that, then this is going to happen.
Agree.
So we really need to educate people.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, this is like the first step, and then we have to move a little bit more. Cesar.
Yes, Edoardo, there is also another idea. I noticed this, but lost. As you know, in many countries, maybe not many, but in some countries, Germany, recently also in Poland, we have this initiative, Soil of the Year. And you started discussion about the soil of the world, yes? We also discussed after our Congress, after your speech, that we should return to all soils of the year. In Poland, we have previously, for example, Chernozems, Rędzina, and other, and look for at least one site when this soil will be displayed, shown as soil profile, as maybe connected also with a geosite. And maybe this is also idea for this new initiative, Soil of the World, the soil of the year in the world. Yes, maybe also we should indicate, ask people, just as an idea, if we have a year of, for example, kind of Chernozemic soil, which will be selected, I don't know the rules of selection, but if it is any specific soil, maybe it is good occasion just for a call. Maybe people, maybe societies in various countries could look for such soils to prepare this site just for broader audience, just living soil, not only on pictures, monolith, but in media, but also in the field. Just as an idea. Yes, thank you.
Yes, you introduced a new initiative that is starting now within the IOSS. I was the promoter of this initiative about the World Soil of the Year. We know that there are already several initiatives at the national level about the soil of the year, and there are very good examples in different countries, but we don't have any World Soil of the Year. So the idea was to upscale this soil of the year at the global level. And so we are just initiating the process. We are going to form a task force just to prepare the guidelines for the application for the acknowledgement of the World Soil of the Year. And this will be celebrated every year, but not at the World Soil Day date, because we have already, maybe you remember, I showed you that we have more than 2,000, about 2,200 events already in place every year on the 5th of December. So we are thinking about another date for the celebration of the World Soil of the Year. But first of all, we have to prepare carefully the guidelines for the submission of the proposal, and then the selection, and then the awarding, because of course we have to award this World Soil of the Year in some event, also by giving some funds for preparing this application. But this is a new initiative that I will give some details more in the future. I cannot give you right now more details on that. But we hope that next year, in occasion of the centennial, we will be able to have at least the first World Soil of the Year celebration.
And then maybe the Paleosol Day, the Paleosol of the world, because probably, yes, I'm serious.
Why not?
Yeah.
Because if we select, for instance, a Chernozem, oh, this is beautiful soil with extraordinary good properties and so on. But a Paleosol can also be as extraordinary as a Chernozem. Why? Because it has memory, and he is, and it is, how to say, it is part of the landscape. Maria, I don't want if you want to add something. And the soil memory is preserved. Why Goryachkin is here to say something about the memory of the soil.
Yeah.
But probably we can also conduct something in parallel. I don't know. This is only a brief idea about the Paleosol of the Year.
Yeah.
Yes, Curtis.
Fantastic idea. I just wanted to follow up on some specific next steps.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that we can go down the checklist. This is the geopark, the geosol, and visibility. Yes, check that off. It's integrated with ecology, geology, culture. Yep, put a check mark by that and prioritize it. Say, you know, it has these really important characteristics, and even stabilizing it. And that one picture that Eduardo showed, you know, under, you know, like this walkway that was under a roof, you know,
Yes.
you could stabilize it. So if you go down through all the checklists and say, yes, 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 and then we have a couple potentially ready to go, I think, would the next step be to get a commission to IUSS commission to carry that proposal forward to UNESCO?
No.
That's my question.
Yeah.
Yeah, should be probably not commission, but working group. No,
Working group,
yes, such
yeah,
groups,
yeah.
yes, yes, created for such a special purposes.
Yes, I think this is a good idea to have a working group.
Yeah.
Inside of
And
IUSS.
now we
with
are
several
reorganizing these working groups in IUSS. It's their running process for now.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to say that I explored the possibility at the UNESCO, and I had the luck to have some contact with someone who is in the system, and he told me that actually introducing a new subject in the World Heritage List is rather difficult, because the World Heritage List is the most renowned one, and it has also some political relevance in terms of geographic balance, in terms of proposers. So it takes some time to have acknowledgement from the World Reference List. There is a commission which is formed by people all over the world who are basically historian, sociologist, sometimes naturalist, but not so, because it was historically based on archaeological settings, not on natural settings. So it is possible, but it's rather difficult. On the other hand, the biosphere list of the UNESCO, and especially the geosite list, which is, as I told you, much newer, it is more open to new proposal. But in any case, I think that we have also to explore other possibility, not only at the global level. First, of course, at the global level is the most important one, because you have a visibility which is given by the World Initiative. So if you are able to introduce a soil in a site published by UNESCO, this is very, very important. But also at continental and even at the national level, it's important. I think that in general, we have to make most of this activity, because soil literacy could be very important. I've seen in different parts of the world, not only in Europe, but also, for instance, in Thailand, a beautiful path with some, from time to time, a soil exposure, where pupils of schools were able to even enter within the soil. In Australia, I've seen a beautiful, really beautiful exposure in this sense. And there were panels explaining what the people were seeing in that very place. Likewise, we have for geology or of vegetation. So I think that, of course, we are a small community. We cannot do everything, but just prioritizing our effort in one or two initiatives could be very good, I think.
Thank you, Edoardo. Any other comment or thought? No? So maybe we can just conclude with this roundtable about what we can do at home, at our institute or our country, and maybe to start to prepare something bigger in terms of the commissions, or inside Paleopathology Commission, inside Geography Commission, or even Classification Commission. No? No. Okay.
Elizabeth,
yes,
may
please.
I conclude my intervention
Yes,
by saying that you must be confident that ISS is close to you, is standing beside to you, both in terms of organization and in terms of science. Of course, science is basically in your hands, in the hands of commission, division, and working groups. So I know, because I know very well the community of paleopathologists, that you are a very strong group, very much motivated. And so I think that you can really do a great job in this sense. But don't forget also that there are other commissions. Sergey was mentioning the Geography Commission, but there are, yes, even division, and there are some funds also available for division to develop specific activities, seed money at the divisional level. And then we have these funds from the IUSS for project, a small project, of course, and not big project, seed money, like in INQUA, no? You know that there are similar possibility from INQUA. So I just suggest you not to forget these possibilities. Thank you. And always consider that the IOSS is by you, okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. So if there is no more comments or ideas, we can close the roundtable. Thank you very much, Eduardo, and
thank you
for this contribution.
Thank you. Bye, Peter. Bye, Maria. Bye, all of you that I know personally.
Goodbye.
Eduardo. Bye, bye, bye. Ciao.
So next step is what?
Next step was supposed to have the presentation of Maria Rosa Soul, and she appeared here, that then disappeared. If she's it would be good. Yes.
I will.
Yeah, call or something. Yes.
Right.
Please.
Her. No.
And we have exactly the time for her presentation.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not saying that the creation of geoparks is not so easy.
Yeah.
It's not so easy because, as I know, I am, for example, in the scientific board of one national park in southern Poland, and we applied for this last 3 or 4 years. National park applied to also gain this name of geopark. So it is a lot of bureaucratic work, and it must be an institution who is owner of the territory. So maybe not governmental, or I don't know, university, but must be owner, must be partner, must be support from local authorities or societies, and it is long way.
20 years. Actually, we have a group in our institute which deals with this UNESCO objects, and I know that.
But it's another story.
It's another story, but
more available, as Eduardo said, it is more local initiative. Of course, it is listed on a global scale, but it is, we may say, more local initiative. It is easier, it lasts, I don't know, 5 or 6 years initiative, but and quite many, as we know, are on the list. And as I told, it is still hard job. Sure.
It was not privacy, it was the national park. Inside the national park was places of park, and inside the national park
But I think that in existing parks or the other protected or non-protected areas, we can look for sites, simply sites, which have specific status. In our law, we have several categories of protection, also geosite or something like geosite. And as I remember, there are quite many ones. Unfortunately, many beautiful paleosols, especially the west sections, were destroyed because it was, people said, dangerous. Local authorities said this quarry was dangerous for children, and they simply reclaimed it. So that means destroyed, filled, and waste or something.
Good houses.
Yes. And the most interesting paleosol section was for last 10 years reclaimed, destroyed.
So no,
Sol is here. Sol Moreno also, yes.
Sol, can you start your presentation? Please, just go ahead. This is like a continuation of what Sergey presented yesterday.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I will share my screen. And you can tell me if you can show the screen. You can see the screen?
Yes, just slideshow, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, well, I want to talk about today. Well, my name is Sol Moreno. I am a PhD student from UNAM. And I want to talk about today about paleofires evidence on soils from karstic environment in Quintana Roo state in Mexico. So first, I want to start talking about the oldest paleofire evidence that we have on Earth that dates back 430 million years ago. And this was recently found, a microcharcoal that was found in a strata from the Silurian period at Wales in United Kingdom. On the other hand, this is the microcharcoal that they found. On the other hand, we have that the use of fire by early hominins started in Africa around 1.6 million years ago. And this is a controversial date always, but in the case of Mexico, we have that the early or the older charcoal related to human activity date back 9,500 years in BP and was found in Actunja cenote, Quintana Roo state in Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula. But it's 1,000 years after that where the Maya civilization started and then spreads across the whole peninsula and use the extensive slash and burn agriculture generated a great impact in areas of jungles and rainforests that have been deforested and burned, generating an impact in a very delicate system like is the karst environment, where the soils generally develop and at this continuous surface. And so we commonly found very thin and dark soils like rancid leptosols, but however is commonly found some very deep reddish soils like lubisols related to karstic depressions, or soils filling cavities in the limestone rocks, like are named or called karstic pockets, like we see in this photo. So we can observe that this is a very dynamic landscape that had suffered an accelerated erosion like in Maya lowlands of Central America, like Dr. Sedov told us yesterday. And this was around 3,000 to 1,000 years BP and was reported by Beach and collaborators. Also, additional to this soil surface erosion, vertical soil erosion is so common in this karstic landscape because soils can move through the limestone cracks and fractures. And this erosion process, horizontal and vertical erosion process, can be even being more accelerated by the occurrence of fires, because fires plays an important role in shaping landscape and have direct and indirect impacts on the environment, including on ecological communities, biochemical cycles, hydrology, and soils. Because fires can produce changes in biological, chemical, and physical soil properties, leaving some evidence that can last some short periods of time, some years, or even maybe permanent. And one of these evidence can be microcharcoals, charred bones, reddish aggregates, the change of the texture of the soil, and all these evidence that are preserved on soil memory. And the paleo fire research can help us to understand how these fires have shaped the landscape and to explore the feedback between human activity, vegetation, and climate. For that reason, we select the area of Quintana Roo State at Yucatan Peninsula in the coastal northwest coast zone, where we have a quarry that is named Coyote. This quarry was sampled by in different parts of the area around the quarry. We have the jungle, some part of the walls of this quarry were sampled. Like we see here, some soils of the jungle, soils from the modern karstic pockets, soils from ancient karstic pockets, and even the pedosediments in a landscape that was presented yesterday by Dr. Sedov too. So we use these materials to study by different methods in order to find these palify evidence using physical-chemical techniques, micromorphology, soil organic matter thermal characterization, mineralogy, some magnetic properties, and radiocarbon dates. But in this presentation, I will focus the attention only to the result of texture, organic carbon, inorganic carbon, the micromorphology evidence, some preliminary results of thermal characterization, and give you some results of the radiocarbon dates. So the results that we have for the soils of the jungle is that these soils are so thin and dark, and they have a lot of a higher clay content, more than 90% of clay, and even around 5% of silt, and not sand at all, or very few content of sand. In the case of organic carbon, we have a lot of organic carbon that varies between 6 and 8%, and the inorganic carbon is lower respect to the organic one, but is higher in the AC horizon. At macroscopic scale of different soils of the jungle, we found that they exhibit a granular structure with a lot of vegetal remains, and we can observe that the aggregates have a high clay content, and the presence of some limestones and charcoals. In the case of the modern karstic pockets, we have a more developed soil with the development of AV horizons that are very clayly too, more than 90% of clay, and the organic carbon is high too, around 8%, and varies between 8% and 2%, and decreasing from the top to the bottom of the karstic pocket. Regarding their micromorphological characteristic, we have that we found at the AH horizons a granular structure, some charcoals and darker sediments integrated into the red soil matrix. And respect to the AV horizons, we also found some charcoals, fresh vegetal remains, and so on, zoogenic activity too. At the ancient karstic pockets, we have several of these pockets, but in this case, I will show you only the pocket number 3 that exhibits a higher clay content on their horizons. Even one of them almost reach 100% of clay, and they presents lower organic carbon than the previous one. The inorganic carbon is slightly higher. At the microscope, we found different structures for the 8 horizons. We identify the granular structure associated with some pedosediments, darker pedosediments integrated into the matrix. For the AB and B horizons, we observe high clay content, a blocky structure, some iron nodules, and some charcoals. Finally, for the collapse cave, we found a sequence of pedosediments trapped in this cave that correspond to red and yellowish pedosediments overlying a gray sediments, and this sequence is repeated in the right side of the cave. But in this case, we found also related to these pedosediments karstic pocket that was filled with a two dark brown pedosediments, 1 and 2, below the red pedosediments. And we will focus the attention to this karstic pocket, and the results show us that their particle size distribution is different from the previous soils, because although this is they present highly clay content, their percentage varies between 70 and 87%, and the sand fraction is slightly higher than the previous ones. Also, the inorganic carbon is relatively higher than the organic carbon, and the organic carbon content is slightly lower than the previous soils. On the other hand, in this karstic pocket, these dark brown pedosediments were associated with a lot of charcoals, charred limestones, and a lot of burnt shells that we can identify too at microscopic scale. For example, from these dark brown pedosediments, we identify that they are a mix between different materials, a red clay matrix mixed with a lot of charred shells, rounded limestone, rounded red pedosediments, and charred limestone. All these material mixed told us about these processes of erosion and transportation of the materials from the surface of the area. Additionally, the soil organic matter was characterized by thermal gravimetry, and we found that the soil organic matter related to the dark brown pedosediments of the cave was not directly burned, because it not shows a big quantity of highly recalcitrant organic matter. Finally, here we present the some of the dates, the radiocarbon dates, and we observed that the soil organic matter, like Dr. Sedov said yesterday, have date backs 2,000 years BP, but the charcoals and the shells are older. They are from 4,000 years BP, And this is coincides with the beginning of the land cultivation in the Yucatan Peninsula by the Maya civilization. So this fire evidence can be found to the burn and slash agriculture that generates an impact in the soil of the area, promoting the soil vertical and horizontal erosion. And all these particles and fire evidence were greatly preserved in this karstic landscape in these depressions. So these are very good things to this evidence. So that's all. Thank you so much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering what is the source of such a high clay? Even you talked about near to 100%.
Yeah, like Dr. Sedov commented yesterday, we have the hypothesis that these highly clay contents are from eroded previous soils that were on the surface of this limestone. And there is a lot of hypothesis of the origin of these clayly soils that is a controversial issue, like Dr. Sedov commented yesterday, that they can comes from different sources like Saharan dust, from volcanic minerals from the Central American volcanoes. And other authors talk about that these clays can come from the red limestones that have a highly ferrous content and a lot of argic minerals. But this is so controversial until these days.
Yes, please, Maria.
Thank you, Sol, for very interesting presentation. Can you suppose, do your charcoals you dated belong to one fire event or to different, or to long-term processing of fires and probably anthropogenic activities? So one fire event or different fire events?
Maybe different fire events, because like this is a very dynamic environment. The sources came from different places, and the charcoals that we found have different ages, like varies some centuries, but it comes from very different fire events.
Do these fire events originate only from anthropogenic impact, or probably they are also somehow related to climatic changes?
Maybe it can correlate to some climatic changes, but like these charcoals age correspond to the beginning of this Mayan civilization impact in the area, is more probably that they are related to human activity.
Thank you.
And additionally to this, all this charcoal was together with shells, with some certain small pieces of ceramic. So this is why we think that it's anthropogenic.
Yeah, with some artifacts like are related to human activity too.
Any other question or comment? No? No, thank you very much, Okay, so now what do we do? We have a break.
Yeah, I think we should start break earlier.
So Sergey, would you like to show your slides or start the conversation? I have a few PowerPoint slides that I can present, but I would invite you to go first if you would like.
I think that Curtis, maybe you start.
Okay, be happy. Good. And good. All right. Soils in time and space. I wanted to just say something about whenever we look at a soil profile or a pedon, it's really a stationary unit. You know, latitude and longitude, it's stationary. And when we think about soil memory, the question is, how is that soil remembering mobile, migrating, bioclimatic zones as they go back and forth across the landscape? So that's why I put here migrating biomes across stationary pedons. And Dr. Targulian, you know, the metaphor of soil memory is just fantastic. It's really been, I think, useful to a lot of people. I've known about it for years, but it's this paper with Sergey that I really got my attention. And of course, you know, Maria's published with Dr. Targulian. There are books written on soil memory in Russia. And so there's a lot of thought that's been put into that. But this particular article, I really liked it because he talks about the palimpsest memory. And that's a neat word, I know everybody knows it, but basically, if you write something on a piece of paper and then you erase it, but it's only partially erased. And then you write something else on the paper and you erase that. And so there's this, you know, cumulative, you know, some people have compared it to a camera with the, you know, long-term exposure that's recorded a lot of things over time. And that's the kind of memory that we derive, you know, just pedagenic processes. But in combination with that, what they refer to as the bookwise stratigraphic memory. And I know that's real important around here because we have periods of landscape stability that alternate with landscape instability. That's erosion and sedimentation between pedagenic horizon formation. And reading this article years ago, and the way that it laid out factors, processes, features, really helpful for me, especially when I went with the NRCS, became a bureaucrat.
That went well.
Yeah. But what they're really interested in is all of this interpretations. Like, who cares? You know, okay, you got these pretty maps, and yeah, it's interesting to think about soils and that, but who cares? And so that's what it's all about. What's the potential of this soil for sequestering carbon? What's the potential of this soil for growing maize? And how does it respond to nitrogen? On and on and on and on. That's really the business that they're in. So they're really interested in properties. So, the organic matter, the cation exchange, the depth of water table, and so forth. But in order to get to the properties, you've got the processes that are working through time that are set into place by the factors. So the factors are really the context in which the the processes generate the properties. And a lot of people, that's as far as they want to go. Like I had an office next to a hydrologist, and he didn't care about whether it's oxisol or Chernozem, or whether he wanted to know what's the percent organic carbon, the percent clay, he wanted the properties to plug into his model. But if you were to say, yeah, we can make a map of Africa showing the percent sand in the upper 10 centimeters, that'd tell you a lot. But if you show a map of Africa where the oxisols are, that has a much deeper understanding. So that's what I wanted to start this with. I don't think this thing's working. Can you
Doesn't work?
advance that slide for me, please? Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to say for around here, factors, of course, the parent material, the lithic inheritance of the soil, and what, we'll see on the field, we got rhyolite, aluminum, for example, gypsiferous clay, quartzose, Diomian sand. All of these parent materials give rise to different soils. But then the soils had that feedback mechanism. They erode. And that was the thing that was really interesting about the Yucatan, the work that Sergey's doing in there, and Elizabeth and all, is if you really did erode that terra rosa, where'd it go? Because erosion and sedimentation are linked processes. And so that's really important around here, because these soils that formed in the lower, topographic lower, they're soils that eroded up slope. So we're really talking about, and even, we talk about primary carbonates and so forth. Those primary carbonates, those individual little particles of calcium carbonate, were they really abraded limestone particles, or were they from eroded soils elsewhere, like in bluffs and so forth? So, so you got that feedback, the parent material, but also topography. And so, and Rolf Mandel talked about this, but 150 years ago, 170 years ago, based on the land survey notes, this was a fairly robust grasp. It gives the idea there is no erosion on the golf course fairway. So if you've got that tied down vegetatively, and then if we look at it today, that's what it is. It's been totally replaced with woody shrubs, and you've got all this bare ground. So now you've got a huge source of dust, but it actually changes the topography. So a lot of these soils that were reported as black ground grasslands, they look like this today. You have this lag of pedogenic carbonate nodules, right? So you have this constant. And you start digging pits in here, what you can see is preserve the old Berry A horizon, and you can trace that, just laterally captured in all these what we call coppice meaning a thicket, coppice dunes, broke it down. So actual change in topography, okay, micro topography. But if we want to link the soil again, and again, these are the factors. We've got the interaction between climate, soil, both heat and water. Heat and water going in, heat and water coming out. And the other big link with climate is topography around here elevation, of course, but aspect really has a huge impact. So these soils that are facing north are Chernozems. These soils that are facing south are what we call Paleosols. And everything's constant except for the slope orientation. So that's a big feedback. Another big feedback around here, the lateral redistribution of water. This is at the Hornock experimental range where we'll go. These are net primary productivity sites. But what it shows is that this landscape gets about 200 millimeters, 250 millimeters of annual precip. But these run-in areas, they get twice that amount. You know, they're in an arid landscape. They get much more water than that, only due to lateral redistribution of the water. Then another one, infiltration. So how much of that water actually goes into the soil profile? Well, and this is the Hornock experimental range. These are red sands that are, you know, converted to blue by playing with the bands that are blowing up on the Piedmont slope of San Andreas Mountains. But again, the slope's the same. And the thing that's different, if you just compare what's coming off the mountains that aren't buried with sand, look like something like this, very different vegetative pattern. You know, you get grasses, you get shrubs, you get a dendritic drainage system, very organized drainage system. If you just go north, keeping everything constant, but now it's all Aeolian sand, very different vegetative pattern. Where are the arroyos, what we call them? Well, there are a few that barrel down through here, but just changing the infiltration has really made a big difference. So we include in climate wind. And wind, huge. When there's barren soils. And so some of these patterns, here's Big Bend down here, come up New Mexico. But if you look at some of the dust, subtract out the clouds, there are dusts in one day. There are dust storms. You can pinpoint where the dust came from. Those things not only go to Kansas, they go to Canada. So it's a major factor of climate on the soils. Then we bring in, that's the abiotic, bring in the biotic, the animals and vegetation. Of course, you've got a lot of bioturbation, termites in this landscape, huge. If there's any cellulose on that landscape, it's gone. Even cattle, cow dung, it's there just for a year or so before it's been totally, part of it's taken up, encased the cow dung or anything. They don't work in ultraviolet, they only work in shelters. And this goes right into the atmosphere. It's almost like a sublimation, going from solid to gas. Then, of course, the soil provides, habitat and water. And in terms of vegetation, of course, anchorage, water, nutrients, feedback, ground cover, carbon propiols, ground cover, and that is the huge factor in terms of landscape stability. And of course, the animals, there's the link there, herbivorous, seed dispersed food habitat. So the factors, and any one of those modified can affect all the soil. So for example, overgrazing. So bring this in like we're always talking about. I mean, they didn't bring in just thousands of head. They brought in tens of thousands of head of cattle from coming in from the east. Keep going west, good forage, good forage, good forage. Get here to the southwest, black grama grass, good forage, and it just overgrazed, both by cattle and sheep as well. So we got herbivory, preferentially going through grass. leaving the shrubs, seed dispersal. That was a major now mechanism for getting those mesquite seed just proliferated across the landscape. And there's ground cover, feeds back into the soil, sedimentation, erosion, topography. So the factors, okay. And I just wanted to put this in because this is really the paleosol, the paleopathology community really used to looking back in time. And I think one of our great strengths is we can not only look back in time, but we can make predictions. Probably better than any other group with respect to soils. And that is, and they say science is predictive. You know when the next solar eclipse is going to be almost exactly. This is also very predictive. A change in climate, what's it going to do to the soils? And therefore, what's it going to do to the vegetation? So those are the factors. I wanted to put up the pedogenic processes, paleocyst memory. And so within the context of those factors, now you've got this parent material in which those processes are making pedogenic horizons, returning that soil into that soil with time. And Pete Berkland, we're going to talk about him a little bit later, but Pete Berkland put this figure together. It's based on Roy's Johnson's 1959 paper. And just in one glance, you can capture all those pedogenic processes, additions, transformations, transfers, both down and up, and removals, and their biological, physical, chemical processes. And that's what you can list right there. And so that, just to get the ball rolling about soils in space and time, I would just say, what's missing? And that was one of the things you wanted to talk about. Is this, we've got all the tools in our toolbox that we need to do our science, or do we need more tools? Are there more discoveries that need to be plugged in here? Biomineralization, for example. So, Sergey, that's what I had, and as a co-convener to just start the discussion on roundtable discussion on understanding soils in time and space.
Okay, can I just demonstrate my slides?
Yeah, yes.
Yes, go ahead. Projector is on.
Yeah, I think, can you close mine?
Yeah, I did close it too.
Okay. Good.
Please show it in the slideshow mode.
Yes, I try.
Okay.
So, can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So you know, I will speak mostly about soil geography and some potential growth points of soil geography. So mostly I will focus on soils in space, but of course it is not possible just to elucidate soil geography without understanding soil in time. So I just want to remember our usual way of soil research. So in reality, we have not pedons, but soil covers, and we just make some pits, then take samples and make interpretation, find the reference group of our soils, and about 90% of whole pedological studies are usually just finished at this stage. But as for soil geography, there is just one additional procedure which allow us to model initial soil cover. So this is just, I think, the essence of soil geography. So, of course, as a representative of Russian scientific school, I think that everything, I believe that everything was started by Dokuchaev and soil geography as well. But main elements of soil geography are soil forming factors, and Curtis elucidated this very well on the very good example. But at the same time, there is such branches as soil topography. It's the term of Dokuchaev. Then it was replaced by Catena concept and soil cover or soilscape concepts of Vladimir Friedland and Francis Hall. And also there is one also very important element of soil geography is a global soil pattern, beginning with some German classical work, but mainly it is this branch was developed by Maria Glazovskaya and her very famous books, two volumes of her soil of the world. However, the basis for the soil geography was formed in the 20th century in principally different technological conditions than those we have now. The number of new methods is much more than the number of new ideas. The number of new ideas in soil geography and new approaches result in the situation that some of theories are put on a dusty shelf. However, the challenges that pedology and soil geography has in 21st century, estimations and dynamics. Excuse me, I just cannot see well. So let's beginning with this soil cortina and soil cover pattern theories. Now we have just a very well developed new computer-based branch of soil sciences, digital soil mapping. And Friedland's concept on soil cover pattern was founded when there was no such possibilities of computer science, and now it is possible to develop a neo-Friedland theory of soil cover pattern based on these of Friedland's ideas and new technologies of digital soil mapping. So just remember that Friedland concepts of soil covers have 4 important components. So first of all, it's just components of soil cover, it's just soils. Then percentage of different soils in soil cover, and I should say that these 2 elements of soil cover pattern concept are widely used even without this concept. But the other 2 are very specific for this concept, and so we need to put into account links between components and contrast soil combinations, and also geometric forms. It's round, sporty, sophogenal, dendritic, erosional, just some net-like pattern grounds of cryogenic systems. According to Friedland, it should be with soil combination with 2 directions of interactions is complex or sportiness. When one direction is mostly considering mesorelief, it is a cortina or variation, and if these linkages between components are not so important, for example, graphs, it is parent material, for example, different parent material, so it is mosaic or tachet. And I believe that such project as a global soil map should take into account all these important elements of soil cover pattern concept. We guess that contrary to Friedland's concept based on combination of soils, the new neo-Friedland theory of soil cover patterns should be based not only on spatial combinations of pedons, but also on soil properties. Yes, here's just the 2 possible ways of how we can divide soil continuum. So this is usual thing that we just try to find different pedons, different soils, but you know that using computer technology we can just use horizons just to explain the characteristic features of soil covers. And also new technologies, it is based on electromagnetic induction and other proxy methods. We can just get information of many different soil properties based on correlation. So the number two growing point is global soil pattern. But if we look at the Dokuchaev map, when there was absolutely, not absolutely, but almost no soil data, it is just the end of 19th century, and look to the modern atlas of Arctic and Antarctic prepared by Soil Bureau and with Arvid Jones as a main editor, you can see that just the general pattern is very close to be the same. Maybe exceptional are different, knowing that Iceland, Kamchatka, and Alaska are full of volcanic soils, and Dokuchaev didn't know about this. So, unfortunately, this branch of soil science, of pedology, was not developed very much. So, and I think that just a result Maria Glazovskaya had in her book Soils of the World are the best example of taking into account not only climate, but also age of the country, topography, and parent materials. It is just the map here, the map of so-called soil geomorphic regions of the whole world. So, but we know that there were some attempts just to analyze the global soil information on soils. Gray with colleagues, his co-author was Zep Deckers also. So they just used the WRB database on soils properties and try to find just these correlations and even some formulas with the coefficient of humidity and content of silica here. And just you can see here's just the example of pH and the sum of bases in different soils in concern of parent material. So if, of course, if you have just less than 40 or 30% of silica, so you should have a lot of calcium, and that's why the pH here is very high because of calcite presence. And another example is global soil map net project, but I don't know, I don't have much information. I also know that it is not very quick developed. So the other growing point is human soil geography. It's the idea of human-induced anthropogenic pedogenesis and geography was widely accepted and relevant soils are classified in many national and international classification systems separately from natural analogs, such as technosols and anthrosols in WRB. And I know that more than 20 years, the team of soil taxonomy are working on anthropogenic order in soil taxonomy. So, however, there is no comprehensive theory, including special pattern of human activity as an acting factor for soil geography. So we know a lot about soil genesis induced by human activity, but as for soil geography, I think that we have much more less information, and there are many good examples of detailed soil mapping in urban areas, archaeological sites, ancient and recent rural places, but we are still very far from predicting of human-induced features in soil covers as we predict natural soils, knowing climate, vegetation, substrate, terrain, and age. We need to involve social, economical, geographical knowledge into practice of soil survey and soil geographical analysis. So the next growing point is extreme pedology. Yesterday there was a very interesting paper of Nikita Mergelov, who showed how soils in extreme condition can help us to understand the soils of very, very old epochs, very ancient epochs, just in Precambrian and even Precambrian is enough. So if we look at the globe, we can understand that deserts have about 25% of territory, rainforest with a lot of non-differentiated soils like oxosols and also permafrost soils just occupied large territories, and if we can access just the area of soils which are in extreme conditions, it should be about 40%. And so the question is, soil science ready to explain more than 40% of Earth soil cover? So here just the general scheme, what kind of extreme soils we can find in our pedosphere. So it is mostly known as clima extreme, as Antarctic, Arctic, high mountains, yes, supraglacial soil-like bodies. But at the same time, we have just topo extreme soils because of very specific topography. Here's just the example from humid tropics. You can see that in spite of such strong climate, there is no development of soil because of very specific karst topography. And also subaqueous extreme or hydro extreme soils, you know, if that according to the new editions of WRB, if we have soils not deeper than 2 meters covered with water, it should be classified as soils. So, and of course, they are very extreme to in comparison with normal soils. So sometimes they never know or oxyaquic conditions. So it's mainly soils developed with very, very low oxy-reduced potential. And of course, some anthroposoils of our beloved archaeological site are also extreme soils because of input of a lot of organic matter, not comparable of that we have in nature. So, and the extreme is with the volcanic or hydrothermal influence. Say the extreme, it's under volcanic or alluvial or tidal zones, and lithoextreme extreme, it is just development on toxic substrates or very poor substrates, as we have here, the pure gypsum, and also soil-like bodies and just soils in caves with a lot of light and other extreme conditions. So, and finally, I think that it is possible to name this kind of soil geography as potential development together with paleopedology. It is soil geography of ancient epochs. So as yesterday I was already told that there are problems understanding ancient paleosols. So and it is possible that most of that information on ancient paleosols are extinct, so it's not possible to get it anymore, and so we need to make some modeling, knowing just information of soil forming factors. So, and here in the situation, contrary to the usual, when paleosol help us to reconstruct paleo environment, now it's time to formulate the reverse problem: how to model soil knowing soil forming factors. It is possible to call it as factoriopedogenic synthesis of ancient paleosols. So, and the synthesis of paleopedology and soil geography has good prospects to develop a new polygenetic theory of time-spatial organization of the pedospheres of past and recent epochs. Thank you for your attention.
Question specifically for Sergey, his presentation. Well, yeah, Sergey, one comment, you showed the picture of Dokuchev that we all know. I think you're beginning to look a lot like Dokuchev. Yeah, that was meant as a compliment. So one meeting, I was going to bring this up later about Pete Berkman, but when I met Peter and Joe, and we had a meeting in Illinois. It was a paleosol meeting, and Leon Fulmer was really excited about making a map, a soil map, that would have exhibited the soils of North America 20,000 years ago, last glacial maps. And
Sorry, North America
1,000 years ago.
yeah, 20,000 years ago, a soil map.
okay.
Yeah. And some people were for it, some people thought it'd really be a great idea. You could do the same thing for the Middle Holocene, the ultrathermal, thermal maximum, and so forth. Based on what Sergey presented and so forth, could we, I'm sure it's possible, but what would a soil map of pick your country look like 100 years from now? Knowing what we know about soils and time and space. Make a soil map of Mexico 100 years from now. How it would look.
Different.
Yeah.
Yes, and it was also my thought, like, because we now have more knowledge, but also soils have been changed. Maybe not because of natural phylogenesis, yes, in some extent, but mainly because of human impact, degradation, erosion, and transformation of the landscape. So I think that the map wouldn't be the same. Yeah. And even this is also a problem for paleosols to put in a map. Terrible difficult.
Yeah. I cannot imagine for the whole globe. Probably it's possible for regional maps, but not for the globe, because we have not enough knowledge about that, I guess.
I think that we can be more optimistic, just looking for the experience of paleontology. For me, it is fantastic that they can reconstruct the image of the big organism as dinosaurs, just having information only on just small portion of a bone. So, and this is real science. They just agree because they understand some laws that organisms have. I think if we just study just all soil covers and some regularities, some patterns, and just the rules of their forming, I think that in future we can do some concept which like paleontology has, and that's why it is just in general possible to reconstruct just the whole soil cover.
Yeah, it is. It's in general possible, but in the future, because we still have not enough knowledge about this source of the past, about different. So it's not. As for me, it's not the time for synthesis. It's just time for accumulation of knowledge.
Yes, maybe it is, but I was thinking about growing points.
Yes, correct.
Well, I think a discussion on what the landscape is going to be like in the future depends on the rate of geomorphic processes in the landscape. If you're in the desert, it's probably not going to look that much different 1,000 years down the road. You're working in Camp Creek in New Zealand, where the maximum age of the soil may be 1,000 years. It's going to look very different. So you can pick your places where you expect to see changes in the soil landscape based on what you understand about what's currently going on there.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to answer your question, but this is something I've been thinking about this whole meeting. And we've been hearing the term polygenetic a lot, right? So it begs the question, are all soils polygenetic?
Yes.
And then, right? And then that also begs the question, what is the soil of paleosol? Because this comes up a lot in the work I do. In fact, typically we get Holocene soils in buried context, buried soils. I just typically refer to them as buried soils, and then I'll call them buried paleosols. Let's say they date back 1,000 years, 2,000. When I get back to the Pleistocene, then I start using the word paleosol. I've been influenced by Vance Holloway. It's all been that. It does the same thing. because the question becomes, if you look at the definition of paleosol, it's a soil that's formed under a different environment, but it doesn't say how different.
How much different,
How
yes.
much different.
Yeah, exactly.
And so,
Important point.
so this is, listening to all this the last couple of days, it's been bringing this back up to the surface of my mind, and this whole business of polygenesis is, I don't know, there may not be a simple, there probably is not a simple answer to either one of those questions. I'm kind of curious about other people's thoughts in this room about what is paleosol, and are all paleosol, or all soils technically polygenetic, all of them, except maybe if they're sitting on the landscape for maybe 100 years. But even that, you might even argue they're polygenetic. So I don't want to put you on the spot, Curtis. What do you think? I'm just curious.
Well,
That was one of the primary conversations that we had, I remember. And John Catt was basically trying to synthesize the definition.
Yeah.
But yeah, you had the relic paleosols.
This is auditorium online cannot.
Good. You had the relic paleosols, again, formed in the past under a different environment, and you had the buried paleosols. And then, but the buried ones, the question was, do they need to be isolated from modern day patogenic processes? And I think the consensus was among that group was to use the word essentially, which,
Well, so these guys, like me in the Midwest, we see a pre-settlement soil that's often buried by post-settlement alluvium. And so we see this nice black A horizon buried underneath this junk sediment that poured into the system when the area was settled by Euro-Americans. And so we call that buried soil, even though it got buried maybe 100 years ago, 150 years ago. It's a buried soil, but is it a buried paleosol? I've seen some people refer to them as being buried paleosols, but they formed under the modern environment. They're just buried. You know what I'm saying? And so,
But a paleosol is a landscape of a soil from a landscape of the past. And that
That's not the
landscape has been
definition.
modified.
it's modified, but you're still in the same landscape position.
It's different.
In the paleo landscape.
Depending, yeah.
Right.
Because for instance, Mexico, in a volcanic country, we have the contribution.
1993 all over again.
For instance, in a Chichon volcano, the eruption was in 1982. So when you go to this area, you can see the soil buried by this ash. And then the landscape during that time was different than today. So I have the right to say that this buried soil is a paleosol because the conditions under this soil was formed changed, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's the same.
This is a really important distinction to make. I mean, we've all touched on the fact that it's a moving target. I mean, depending upon what you call a major change in climate. I mean, Jan Hendricks, whom Curtis knows, is a Paleocene hydrologist. He took a student and had them working on soil development down here at Las Cruces using the records from the airport, the precipitation records for the last 100 years. And that student had 3 soils, a silt, a clay, and a sand, and analyzed modeled the water movement through those soils. The clay and the silt, very little water got past the rooting zone and mostly was evaporated. In the sands, there were 5 periods in 100 years when water got beyond the rooting zones of plants, and it was actually used to make some sort of pedogenic features within the soil itself. So is this paleosol? I mean, at what point do you start putting a boundary and saying, well, you know, after the Pleistocene, anything that was older than the Pleistocene is a paleosol? Well, that would be a reasonable assumption because that's one of the widely recognized changes in climate. But there have been fluctuations in climate since then that are of a similar magnitude, not the same duration. So, I mean, we could be counting a number of angels on the head of a pin for all year and not come up with an agreeable distinction. And this sort of takes me down the road of soil classification, which I'm not a big fan of. I shouldn't be saying this aloud. But I mean, you end up having these discussions and splitting hairs and things like this, and people getting really excited about it. But the fundamental thing is, does it really make a difference? And I think that's the question we should ask ourselves.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And during our excursion also in Iran, it was always questioned. When I solved for myself, at least, I don't know, it's personal view, that something should be in the definition of environment. So what we say, paleosols are the soils formed in a different environment than now. So that environment, not only the climate, but also vegetation, landscape, and yeah, in the most cases when the soils are different climate, it's easy. You can say it's a paleosol, but a lot of paleosols that are looking like similar soils as the present day climate. But during the formation of those soils, the landscape was different. Erosional features, vegetation. So that's my view about that.
Getting back to Rolf's example, the landscape is not, the environment is not the same in the Midwest as it was 200 years ago.
Well,
I mean, beyond climate, there's incredible differences in land use. And that's really what drove the area of soil. It's a different world, really.
but you could also be thinking about pedogenic pathways. And those soils formed in the same pedogenic pathways with the modern soils forming. So you can go that route too. I'm not saying they're one of the, I'm just presenting this as being problematic. Because students ask me this all the time, right? To be honest,
I don't know really good answer. Buried soil is more taxonomic, in my view, definition that is very helpful also. And I think they produce this for most management purposes. When it's below 50 centimeter, okay, they point to erosion or whatever, but also it loses its importance to agriculture, to crop production most of the time. So they need a definition for buried soil also.
Sorry. Yeah.
Maybe slightly later because I wanted to completely check.
All right. While the ball is rolling.
All I wanted to say was
it is still in our table, but completely.
that the record of climate change in soils is not preserved universally across the soil landscape. If you have very young soils and the climate changes, then the pedogenic features are relatively ephemeral. I mean, the early stages of soil development, the accumulation of carbon in the surface and the AEC horizons can be easily overprinted by a significant climate change, and particularly if it goes on for some time. At the other end, if you've got a stage 5 calcic horizon that's at the surface, its ability to record a climate change is really quite diminished. I mean, there's very little left there that's going to alter in a changing climate. So there's almost a sweet spot in terms of soil development that has the ability to retain characteristics of a former climate and also have the ability to identify that change that has occurred at some point.
Yeah. So before we go there, if an archaeology company came up and said, we want you to map out the sweet spot, could you do it?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It is connected to previous statements to Harvey.
there is one additional, in my opinion, more and more important aspect of this discussion of understanding soils in time and space. Soils created by people, created or deeply changed, substantially changed. So the topic was ignored for some time. Recently, the discussions are more intense, but the human impact, especially if we are talking about soils completely created as completely new soils, is now important because recently we discussed this, for example, with Danny Itkin. How long soils constructed by humans as one of factors, are recognized as anthropogenic or anthropic or human-made soils. If we expect that after this formation, construction, changing of properties, still various environmental factors influence the soil, so it has right to evolve in a natural, how to say, style, and to change into new natural soil. And there is a question, do we agree that anthropogenically constructed soils may change into natural soils? If there are, for example, the transformation evolution is ongoing on the building, on construction.
Why not?
So do we agree that this soil will be called Rengina on the pyramids or Maya constructions? Do we agree that, for example, soils on terraces, when we have constructed walls, and we discussed this with Danny Itkin, and we are sure the material was moved to create this new soil, that after some time they will restore calcic horizon, restore, for example, I don't know, cambic or something, and we still can recognize this terracing, we still can recognize walls, but maybe soil change it into completely natural soil, and maybe it should be recognized as natural soil, no more anthropogenic. So where is the barrier? Where is how we imagine transformation of soils? There is a topic, yes, soils in time and space. So I think there is new aspect of this discussion, soils created or transformed by humans. We have the same topic question if we are talking about soils, for example, on the heaps, mining heaps, yes, material and landform completely created. Now you are introducing also to soil taxonomy, probably new order, yes, we have also in WRB. But the question is how long we will recognize the soils on heaps, or for example, on highways, maybe not on highways, but on sites, as anthropic or another soils. Where is the how to say, the possibility, what time, which changes, just to accept that they maybe evolve to natural soils?
For me, if soil, anthropogenically produced soil functions in anthropogenic environment, until it functions in anthropogenic environment, it can be regarded as an anthropogenic soil. But if, let's say, if we have a cultural layer, for example, yes, and the settlement existed something like 1,000 years and then was abandoned. Since then, for me, this substrate is not anthropogenic soil, but the anthropogenic substrate, and the normal, let's say, zonal processes could start within this substrate. So since then, we can regard this substrate as a parent material, but not as a soil, anthropogenic soil, but as anthropogenic soil material, probably.
Because it is a very important point, because now the prevailing point is that anthropic soils are defined mostly by material.
Yes.
And artisoils will be, how to say,
So not by processes, but by
recognized
material. Yes, yes, right,
transported,
right, you're right.
and so on. So how long? This is the question.
Yeah.
The idea for WRB is that as long as we can recognize unchanged properties of this anthropogenic material, for example, bricks, yes, in the soil, until we should classify this as an anthropogenic soil. But when bricks, I don't know, disappear, weather, and the material which will change to be unrecognizable as anthropogenic, so the soil change into natural. I discussed with myself this problem in one of old destroyed by earthquake towns, Greek towns in Turkey, when I have seen the cross section and a lot of bricks, a lot of stones, previous buildings, but it was destroyed 600 years ago, mixed, created substratum, anthropogenic substratum. But now I recognize them beautiful calcisol with cambic horizon. Is it still anthropogenic soil with this anthropogenic
Soil,
material?
it's normal soil anthropogenic material.
Do you accept this? This is
I
point
think
for
so.
future also, for discussion.
How about the idea that all agricultural soils are anthropogenic?
Yeah, it's the same question.
Yes,
actually.
it is important point. At which level of transformation? Yes, at which,
And they're maintained
yes,
at an anthropogenic level or in terms of classification because we're constantly modifying them.
Yes, it is very important point. We abandon commonly this point, but we know that, for example, fertilization and cultivation of soil may how to say removal of natural vegetation may completely change direction or intensity, as we are talking, for example, on clay irrigation in alphisols. Present day cultivation may completely stop this process, but we still recognize this as alphisol, and we skip this anthropogenic very long influence. Of course, I agree, but I mean now about soils evidently changed or created, yes, by humans.
But these are being created, they're being maintained at a level of development that they wouldn't normally be maintained at. In terms of, I'm thinking particularly in terms of soil fertility, but also in the hydrologic conditions too. I mean, I have a field outside my house. I watched them planting a field of chili in there this year. They were out there with the laser smoothing the thing out so it was all level and the irrigation would work properly and all that sort of stuff. They've certainly changed the surface, they've changed the characteristics of the soil. And in fact, the soil itself is, and this is on the floodplain of the Rio Grande, so the soil itself is a layer of silty clay about 10 to 15 centimeters thick over sand. And most of that silt and clay has come in with the irrigation water. And so that is an anthropic soil. I mean, without that, it would look very, very different.
Yeah, I think as a soil scientist, we should develop these ideas. They are very useful, and in what is the objective of knowing the soil anthropogenic or not? In archaeological aspect, it's important. We know that they ask us if there is a human dispersal or there. In agricultural aspect, like differentiation of malic from anthropic epipedon, for example, it happened to me that authorities came and wanted if this land was grabbed before it was rangeland or not. They didn't have satellite imagery. So what is very useful is the determination of the phosphorus content. And if it is regularly dispersed deep in the soil or not, that's defined in taxonomy. So very important actually to see if human has any effect on the soil.
It is
more important than terminology, I mean.
It is very important because, as you know, in some countries, for example, the policies are related to soil names or classifications. And if soil is classified as, for example, organic soil, well, there are completely different rules are for minerals. So there's a question, what is organic soil? How thick, how rich in humus? So the statements made by society may influence policies, finances, economy, many aspects, yes, and also environmental aspects. And the same we have with anthropogenic soils. In some countries, some cases now, depending on the soil names and classification, we have to do cultivation, reclamation or not, or this reclamation, another kind of reclamation. So it has many practical, it may have also many practical aspects, but I'm sure that our classifications should reflect our point of view, our concepts. Because classification is not just for classification. It's not only purposeless and for scientific, how to say, pleasure. Yes, for pleasure of researchers. It must reflect our point of view, our imagination of transformational processes and the stages of development. Yes, and this is why, for me, as now leader of this group working on WRB classification, it is very important how the discussion on some soil transformation will place particular soils or soils of, as you told that you accept this situation. Many people accept another point of view,
sure.
And this is important for me to how to say spread this discussion and to learn to know as many as possible point of view and balance what is prevailed.
Right.
Now.
And so let's bring Sergey back in. We're about out of time. So do you have thoughts on if there is an anthropogenic feature, a burial mound or roof material or a roasting pit, and it begins pedogenic modification, at what point do you stop calling that an anthrosol or some kind of, artisol, and now start calling it a Chernozem, Cambisol or something? Do you have any thoughts on that, Sergey?
My problem is that, I don't hear if somebody very far from microphone.
Okay.
So, but I can say that I think this difference between anthropogenic or post-anthropogenic soils, as I understand, yeah. So I think first of all, just normal agricultural use of soils have very different remnants of this agricultural activity. For example, for Chernozems, for Russian Chernozems, in 15 years there was the granular structure just was rebuilt in the soil profile. And about 50 or 70 years, the general store of carbon in post-agrogenic Chernozems are the same as in natural one. And as for podzols, for example, this is a great difference because we can see the remnants of agricultural activity in the soils which were abandoned about 200, 300, or even 400 years ago. So, and that's why I think that it depends on the soil, because some of them became natural again very fast, and some of them can bury these remnants of former agricultural activities for hundreds of years, and where just put the limit from anthropogenic to post-anthropogenic soils. I think it's easy, because if it is now do not use in the agriculture or in some other anthropogenic activity, I think it's not anthropogenic but post-anthropogenic. And whereas put the limit between post-anthropogenic soils and natural soils, it is the real challenge, I should say, because it depends, I think, on just the general, maybe it is just a question to soil morphologists, I think, because if you have a general view of a natural soil, so it is maybe now it's natural with just some fragments of anthropogenic activity in the past. But if you can, no, for example, so in Brazil, I do remember this is, I don't remember the name, Solo Preta or something like this.
Terra preta.
Terra preta. So terra preta just, I think, can serve the anthropogenic activity for hundreds of years, or maybe even more. So they are still post-anthropogenic, but it is very easy to differ it from natural soils of Brazil. But in other cases, it could be very difficult.
Well, I think we're on agreement on it being very difficult. So thank you, Sergey. We're at the end of this roundtable. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to Maria.
Yeah, yes, actually the discussion is very important and interesting, but I guess and I hope we will have a chance to continue it in the field during the field tour, because now we should shift to the next our short in memoriam session. And as I see Maria Gerasimova will tell about some of the people past recently is here, and I think Curtis will start about Peter Virtual, and then we will continue about our other people.
Okay, great, glad to. So I keep talking about this Paleosol conference. Went to several of us, and that was the first time I met Pete Berkland. And so Pete Berkland wrote this book in 1974, Pedology, Weathering, and Geomorphology Research, which evolved into Soils and Geomorphology 10 years later. And then 1999 was the updated and last edition. And several of us have talked about how important and how, just in terms of understanding concepts, and not only understanding concepts, but basically getting, very thorough references to go directly to the literature. So Pete Berkland passed, and I just wanted to make sure that we remembered him, and I wanted Peter, or Joe, or Rolf, or anybody else might want to say a few words. Bruce might want to say a few words about Pete Berkland.
Well, I'll begin. I met Pete in 1970, I think in 75, I was a master's student at the University of Texas. And my mentor, Kurt Sorensen, and my other mentor, Vic Baker, brought him in to give a lecture. And so he had an extra day, and he decided he wanted to go out and see my study area in central Texas, the relic paleosols on the high terraces of the Colorado River. And he spent the whole day with me, and it was a great experience for me. That really opened up a friendship that persisted until he died. In fact, when I moved up to Kansas to finish my master's, he wasn't that far away. He invited me over to Colorado and took me out I spent the weekend with him, out looking at soils along the Front Range. But my point is that he loved working with students. You know, he was very approachable, and he was a real big picture man. You know, he always said to me, look at the landscape, look around you. He produced some pretty well-known soils germophytologists, Vance Holliday, Dan Moose, Meredith Riehaus.
Jennifer Harden.
Yes, Scott Burns, kind of the list goes on, who all became very good teachers themselves. And so, he had a real loss, but he had a great whole life, and he enjoyed it to the end, practically. You know, and really left a legacy. So it's something, you know, we all wish for ourselves.
I didn't interact with him that much, but I certainly knew who he was. And speaking of, and read his books and so forth. But just speaking of that paleophytology symposium, I rode to the symposium with Berkman because he was with his wife and they had a van, a VW van that they would camp in. And they were coming and I don't know where all they were gonna go when they left there, but they came through Madison and they picked up Vance Holiday. And I rode with them down to Illinois where the meeting was. As did I. Were you, I was gonna ask you, were you in the van as well? I couldn't remember. And I have a bunch of his publications, or not his publications, his reprints that he'd gathered over the years. You know, when people retire and pass away, you got to give your library to somebody else, otherwise it gets thrown away. And turns out a lot of his, especially Midwestern publications, because he had spent some time during his training years in the Midwest. And so I have a bunch of his Illinois State Geological Survey bulletins with his notes in it, with things like Rui says, whatever, from field trips that they were on.
He really argued a lot.
Yeah.
Well, Rui was all about climate, and Pete thought a lot about time. So they constantly got into arguments.
He was a very approachable guy. I mean, when I first met him, I was still doing my master's in New Zealand. This would be 76, I guess. And my professor, Phil Conklin, some of you might know him, said, "Yo, you should read this book by Pete Berkland." And I read it, and we're civilized down in New Zealand. We have morning and afternoon tea, so I go into the tea room there one time, and Phil was seated there with somebody, and I just went up to him and said, "Oh, I've been looking at this book by this guy Berkland," and Pete was sitting right next to him. So that was the start of a pretty long friendship. In fact, he was instrumental in me actually coming to the States. And I caught the power of Pete. He wrote a reference for me, and I got into a geology program, never having taken a geology course in my life. I thought that was a hell of an achievement when I look back on it. But he was also, you know, he was just such this guy was, I thought, as a giant in the field, but he was so approachable and so easy to be with. It just took away all that mysticism, if you like, about him. There's a whole bunch of stories about how he interacted with people. I remember a story where he was in Canada and meeting with somebody, and the student came up to him and said, "Oh, would you sign this book, one of the books here that Curtis showed?" And so Pete signed it, and the guy looked at it, and it was an older edition of his book, and Pete had written, "Peter Berkland, buy the new version, you cheap bastard." So, but I mean, the other thing that he was renowned for was cheap booze. I mean, beer, it was just, if it had beer on the label, that was good enough. It didn't have to belong to any company. Wine, you know, if you buy it by the 5-gallon jar, it was a lot cheaper, and it was absolutely fine for him.
Well, we always remember him as a scholar, but he made a good point. He was just a good person.
Yeah.
Very collegial.
Yeah.
You know, he was very approachable. Just a good person. Yeah.
Yeah, he certainly didn't stand on his reputation or anything like that. I mean, he was, just the easiest person to deal with.
Well, wouldn't say that about Bob Louis.
That's all I heard.
Okay, good. Just one last thing. So Hans Jenny wanted to get a geologist in the soils department at Berkeley. So they hired Pete Berkland. And he was there for a while, then he went to Boulder. But John Hawley, who we'll talk about a lot, for the leaders of the Desert Project, had also applied for that job.
He said he didn't get it. He came to the Desert Project in Berkeley and went to Berkeley University. So anyway, that's, that was the one person that we wanted to remember.
Okay. May around the presentation.
But Pete had, he really set the standard in terms of soil geomorphology. That really is what he created.
Actually, we have some more people to memorize, and one of them is Victor Targulian. Many of you knew him, and this is my teacher and my friend, and he passed away this year. Yes, just to remind about his contribution to the, actually he done enormously a lot for studying soil genesis and soil geography and theory of soil science and pedology, and especially the concept of soil memory, as we mentioned today. And this is his last book. It was just a collection of his previous works devoted to soil as a system, to soil genesis and soil memory, and anthropogenic soils, and his three directions of his studies during the whole life. And he also contributed a lot to paleopedology, and he was very active in the international community of paleopedologists and pedologists and soil geographers. And he has a really long and bright way in science, started in times of the expensive soil geographical studies. And this event, this first photo is just from his first ocean trip in tropical waters. He loved a lot these travels, and he brought the very fresh view on the tropical soils during these trips. And this is very famous 1974 World Congress in Russia, where he prepared the field excursion, field guide, and elaborated the hierarchical approach to studies of soil morphology. And as I said, he also contributed a lot to the development of the knowledge on paleosols and development of the paleosols international communities. And this is the picture of the when the he was the first winner of the Goryachkin award in 26 year. And I just wanted to say to add that he was a very bright personality, both in science and in life. He was, for me, he was half dark, but at the same time, a very good friend, very warm and supportive and wise all the time. So remember him. And the next person whom we would like to memorize is George Stoops, and I give the word to Maria Gerasimova, who's here online, I hope. Maria, are you here?
Okay. Unfortunately, the slides are not moving, and I have the first slide only. I cannot see something further. There is a technical problem. Yulia Konoplyannikova has the same problem. I see only the first slide and nothing more.
Do you see the slide now?
No, the same, only one, the first one.
Yeah, it moves.
I don't know how to move it. Oh,
Wait,
now I
wait.
see the whole. I see
wait.
participants.
I'm gonna share it again, maybe it helps. Do you see the slide now?
Oh, yes, thank you. I see the slide. Okay. Dear colleagues, I should like to speak about Professor George Stoops, whom I knew personally, and I think that many of us had some contacts, well, by mail or by real conversation in the field. And he is a well-known scientist, and we think that he is a great micromorphologist. He had many students around him always, and he liked to speak with them and to ask not very easy questions, etc. So it's such a team of young people always around him. He was traveling a lot. He visited many countries, mostly in scientific excursions, and it was very interesting always to listen to his clarifications at the soil pits. George Stoops was very young, and when he came to Moscow for the first time, it was a workshop on soil micromorphology, and the picture was taken at the Faculty of Soil Science, Moscow University. So it's memory. By education, George was a geologist, and he was very faithful to his Ghent University, where he studied, and then he worked there until all his life, practically, with short breaks. He studied tropical and volcanic soils, being a geologist first, and I think that weathering was a problem that attracted him, and therefore he had to study mineralogy, primary minerals, and from primary minerals, from thin sections even, he moved to micromorphology of soils, and he had the chance to see many landscapes and many thin sections, mostly of tropical soils in Congo and some other countries. And I think that for most of soil scientists, at least of my generation and the younger one, George Stoops is the main micromorphologist. It's his main sphere of interest. I should like to move the slide. And it is not moving. Okay. Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you. Now about micromorphology. I think that we discussed it with Maria, that micromorphology is very important to everybody, and a few words about it. In this time, in 60s, 70s of the last century, there were some problems, conceptual problems, and they might be even named antagonistic, because it was a system of Walter von Kubijena, which was quite genetic, which was addressed and oriented on different soils, on soil genesis mostly, and the terminology and the concepts were related to this issue. On the other hand, there was a system of Roy Brewer, who was more morphographic, I would say, describing, measuring, and rather formal formulations of the results. And it was not so sharp, these contradictions, but nevertheless they existed. And in 1985, such book was published. It was a handbook compiled by 6 leading soil scientists, micromorphologists, and this book was a compromise. They tried to reconcile the ideas of Kubijena, to formulate them, formulate them, maybe express them using some terminology of Roy Brewer. This was the first step, first achievement, maybe in micromorphology. Then, having this consensus, George made such a book. It was his personal book, guide how to describe thin sections, and people use it very broadly. It was translated, part of it was translated in several languages, and now most of soil scientists, micromorphologists, use his terminology, his approach, his pictures, The book is supplied with a disc, and you can see all details of microfabric of different phenomena. This was description. Description was okay, but what to do with description? And the ideas of Kubiena, to which George was following, he was following them more, I think, than other ones, and he collected some people, he gathered some people, many people of different countries, and they wrote such a wonderful book, Interpretation of Micromorphological Features, which means it's genetic interpretation, it's linked to soils, it explains processes, it explains different maybe pedofeatures and phenomena which cannot be seen and cannot be sufficiently explained by field data. So it was the first issue, and after 10 years there was a second one. Please move the third slide. Another aspect of Stoops' activities was cooperation with many countries. He participated in programs, university programs, mostly in African countries, but also in Asia. You see here the names of the countries. And what is very well known to everybody is that George arranged international training courses on soil micromorphology in different countries. There he was sometimes guest lecturer. There he explained, he worked in sections with young people, personally explaining him what they see and how they can understand it, what does it mean. And therefore he had a lot of students or colleagues who worked with him, whom he helped. And well, as a symbol of our international context, it's his photograph in Turkey with, well, Russian ladies micromorphologists. And so now I think that his activities were very helpful for paleopedologists, because, well, it's known and there are many publications on the subject, and George Stoops was, I would say, among the initiators of turning to archaeological micromorphology as well. He had some medals, and among all the medals, the Kubiena medal of the ISSS was very important for him, as well as other medals. Thank you. That's all about George. Now, next person about whom I would like to say some words. I was also personally acquainted with him. It was Igor Vasilyevich Ivanov, such a simple name. He's a paleopedologist, more than George Stoops, I think. He's well known to paleopedologists in Russia. He was geographer by education and by some of his activities. He was professor, had some postgraduates, and such honored scientists of Russia, such a honor, sign of honor. His main interest, of course, was soil evolution, and he made a lot in this sphere. But along with this main sphere, which he studied in the steppe zone of European Russia, he had two, I would say, maybe hobbies or two very important fields of activities. First, he wrote a monograph on the history of soil science. And this monograph is very interesting because it's not only events, as usually such monographs on history are written, but in his book, he discusses maybe more, discusses some concepts, he criticizes some of them, he supports other concepts or theories, and it covered the period, such a long period, it was the first volume. The second volume, continuation, of course, he started, but he didn't finish it. He told me once that to write about this period from 50s, 60s, it was more difficult for him because there were more contradictions and problems. This was one of his hobbies. And another one was very important and very useful for many people. He compiled a guide or inventory of publications in our main journal Почвоведение, Russian version, and it covered 100 years. These were papers which were enumerated and which were collected according to all the rules of bibliography. And now this work stopped at the turn of the centuries, but we hope that it will be continued. His colleagues tried to do it. Next slide, please. 2 words about his biography. He was from Stalingrad, Volgograd, where he was born and where he had his primary school and University of Volgograd. And his one of his topics, interests, was oil polluted soils. And this was the theme of his PhD thesis, and the thesis was supervised by Maria Glazovskaya. Maybe many of you know this name, this wonderful person. In 1971, Igor Ivanov started to work in Pushchino Institute of Soil Science and Agricultural Chemistry. It was Academy of Science of Russia. It was his first name of this institute. Now it has a very, very long name with the word problems or essential problem, basic problems of soil science, etc., etc. And there in this institute, he was also very devoted to this institute. He began to study paleosols, and it was very successful, more successful maybe than his activities in reclamation, soil reclamation, irrigation, and problem with Chernozyms. It was the time when these problems were discussed very actively, and in this photo we see Viktor Abramovich Kovda. Well, I think that people know him, discussing some acute problems with maps, etc. And his main, what we know about his activities in paleopedology, they were very extensive in different areas, in different aspects. He cooperated with Alexandrovsky, and they created a system in those times, in the 80s, 90s. They created a system of analysis, analyzing paleosols, and one of his important directions, trends, was that he cooperated with archaeologists, and it was rather new in those times. Then he wants another sphere of interest were Eurasian steppes as related to climate change, and also as he was working in Caspian lowland, he was interested and he tried to solve the problem, one of many people who tried to solve this problem concerning the fluctuations of the Caspian sea level. And the results of his activities in the sphere of paleopedology was his monograph, Evolution of Steppe Soils in the Holocene. Details I can show of this book, I can show on the next slide, please. Here is a long text. I would say that he made such a system of events during the Holocene, starting with the early Holocene and the last periods. And what was important that he tried to explain, to bind the pedogenic processes to climate changes and soils which existed in different periods of the Holocene. And many people have done it, but his particular maybe feature was that he had a very broad system spectrum of objects. It was forest steppe, dry steppe, semi-deserts. It was in European Russia, then Urals, or Siberian plain, Central Russia, and Mongolia. So it was a very broad geographical issue, a geographical sphere, and for each one he tried to find differences, and he had such a system, a scheme of changing climate, changing processes, and he insisted on the fact, maybe, I don't know is it correct or not, that these changes were very regionally oriented. They were different in different periods and in different parts, in different areas that he studied. And my last remark, sad remark, that he was a person, very enthusiastic person. He always found new problems for study, for solve, for discuss, and new research spheres. And he didn't limit himself by these spheres. He always wanted to share his knowledge, to discuss it with young generation and with not very young people also. And this is one of the features of his character that will be in our memory. Thank you.
Let's say a few words about Olga Chichagova. She was my teacher and my friend. She was a academic Gerasimov students and started working in the Institute of Geography, Russian Academy of Science in 1956, and she organized with academic Gerasimov radiocarbon laboratory in our institute. It was in 1972, many years ago, and this interesting photo you can see. Maybe you know academic Gerasimov. She was a close friend of Victor Targulian, and she working with our famous paleogeographer Andrei Velichko. You can see in this old photo Andrei Velichko and Akint Petrovich Gerasimov, Olga, and Los. Yes, next please. And the main mission of the laboratory, radiocarbon laboratory, Institute of Geography, was to study the radiocarbon age of soils, soil organic matter, and Olga Chichagova was conducted first radiocarbon date for Russian Chernozymes, for Paleosols soils, and this next. And the main work of the book of radiocarbon dating of humus. Unfortunately, this book not translated to English or another language, but Olga had many articles in English, for example, in radiocarbon, in geoscience, in Cartena, and all of this knowledge published in English language too. Please, next slide. And very important for me and for my young colleagues that we could work with Olga Chichagova in our laboratory and building a new laboratory with your supervisor. And she was very, very cute and very cool woman, and she was like mother and grandmother for all of us. That's all.
Just a couple of words about George Stoops.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Please,
just
yes,
I couldn't start. Yeah, I was his student. I was fortunate enough in 2002. He was my PhD advisor also, and I went for a year to his lab in Ghent and had a chance to attend his lectures in micromorphology and another lecture also on the interpretation, where a lot of archaeologists also I remember from Canada or other countries attending. He was a very great teacher. And he just, in one of the emails, we had email exchange every year, especially he's sending Christmas messages. And the last email, I remember he asked me if I'm willing to write a review paper on the micromorphology of major soils of Iran. And he told that it's a good idea for other also places to do that and publish in Catena, which he believed that it's most welcoming such review papers. Yeah, he was a great guy. Thank you.
I have known all these great persons that passed away, but I remember with love to Victor Targulian, who visited us in Mexico several times. We worked with him in the field, and he was so wise that he knew how to put the finger in the big stuff that we have to learn. So I learned with him in the field, in the lab, in the conferences, all the time smoking. And but the last time I saw him was in Moscow in 2013. We visited him in his house. He invited to drink tea. And he was somehow sad in that moment. And this is what I have in my heart, this sadness of this moment. So goodbye, Victor.
Yeah, and probably I would also say a few words about the George Stoops, because I also met him for several times and contacted him by email quite a lot. And of course, he was micromorphologist. It was the gifted thing. But as for me, the paleopedology is just impossible without micromorphology, because morphology is just the first step, and micromorphology just give us a wider scope of the soil processes. And this is the basic thing, very important. And George's, actually, I participated in one of his great courses. It was in Germany, in Tübingen that time, and all the students just loved him. He was so easy, so open-minded, and easy approachable also. Anytime you could just write him a message and he answered nearly immediately for all your questions and concerns. It was great. You will miss him.
Yeah, he spoke in at least 5-6 languages.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think lunchtime is coming.
Lunchtime, okay. We have one more roundtable. Is that the end, right?
Yeah. And restaurant.
Okay.
Oh, yes, and if we have some time for business meeting, we should proceed it also. But I think this last roundtable wouldn't be so long.
Are supposed to give quantification of different soil processes and quantitative measure for paleoclimatic conditions. So something like a quantitative proxy of paleoclimate. And as far as modern equipment for X-ray fluorescence analysis is now quite available, and many researchers have it. These estimations became very popular, and in many papers they are the main and sometimes even unique proxy offered for the sequences. Or if it is not unique proxy, and if it is combined with other evidences of paleopedogenesis and paleoenvironment, their interpretation is anyway straightforward. One index, one process, direct paleoclimatic interpretation. So what we would try to check is exactly this process interpretation. Do indexes really develop upon one only process? And is their interpretation so straightforward? Or the story is more complex, and we must take into account the whole, or at least various aspects of paleopedogenesis to interpret these indexes. Sorry. The slides do not change. Maybe it is related with the process of. I think I must stop sharing and then return.
Yeah, right. Go ahead. I cannot do anything here.
Now it works, yes?
Yes, it works.
So we decided that to make our small experiment with two most popular indexes of weathering. This is CIA, coefficient, I think it's index of alteration, and the same index without potassium. Both these formula are taken from the works of Nathan Sheldon, who is a great promoter of use of geochemical indexes for paleoenvironmental interpretation. What are our objects to which we decided to apply these indexes? These are complete profiles of modern surface soils, most typical for the temperate, humid paleoclimates, and they are quite common in the paleopedological contexts, in various paleosol sedimentary sequences. So very frequently these soils, in fact, are the objects of paleopedological and paleoclimatic interpretation and application of geochemical indexes. For comparison, we took the several published results about weathering rings. In this case, we could be more or less sure that comparing the unweathered core of the stone and weathered peripheral rind of the stone, we obtain the signal from pure weathering without other additional processes which would affect the signal. So with these weathering rings, we start. Here is the collection of results from several cases of weathering rings. The original chemical compositions were published, I think majority of these by Professor Targulian. whom I think you just mentioned in your session before this one. And we see, comparing weathered material in the rind and the material of the unweathered core, that both coefficients work quite well. In the weathered material, we have higher values of both coefficients. In comparison with the core, that means that really weathering signal is here. Weathered materials should have higher values of coefficients than unweathered ones. And now we pass to the soil profiles. And here we see something unexpected. We see in, for example, in retisol, alphisol profile, we see rather low values in the sea horizon, logic, it is unweathered one. We see maximum values in BT horizons, but we see strong minimum in the alluvial horizon. By the way, these results are taken from the excellent book, unfortunately now it is partly forgotten, by Professor Targulian and his co-authors, prepared for the Soil Congress in Moscow in 1974. It is really profound insight into genesis of the alluvisols, retisols, soil with clay illuviation on loamy sediment in temperate zone, which really combines a lot of morphological and analytical data. I recommend you a lot this book. So, minima in alluvial horizon, let's remember it. Again, no change of slides. I think I again
Try to do it.
go out, see you all, that is a pleasure for me. Again, share the screen. And now it works. Podsol, again, data of chemical composition, bulk chemical composition taken from the works of Tonkanogov. Also quite profound researcher of Russian burial soils, unfortunately also now passed already away. We made calculation based on his results from various podzol profiles. Here is one of them. Again, minimal values in sea horizons. Maxima in spodic horizons, BF. And again, minima, even stronger minima than in sea horizon, in alluvial horizon. I don't know what do you think for us, for the authors of this presentation. It is obvious that E horizon is the zone of the most strong weathering. So in E horizon, we should expect maximum values of these coefficients if these coefficients are really depend on weathering process. Some decades ago, the idea existed that B horizon is also the area of strong weathering and even maybe stronger than alluvial horizon. But all mineralogical evidences, I would say direct evidences of silicate weathering, are in favor of the interpretation that in E horizon, weathering is at maximum. First, etching of weatherable silicates like feldspars, amphiboles, also micas. Exactly in E horizons, we see strongest etching of these minerals, whereas in the B horizons, the etching is quite modest, if any. And then evidences from clay minerals. In E horizon, we have most strong degradation of micas, especially biotides and chlorides, and their transformation to vermiculite and especially hydroxide interlayered vermiculite with aluminum interlayers. All this process evidence strong acid attack on the silicates, and it is quite logical. The upper alluvial horizon is most close to the litter, to the organic soil horizons of the forest soils, and from organic horizons, of course, major part of weathering agents, organic acids, arrive. And also alluvial horizons is the area of rather high fungal activity and root respiration. So exactly here, most weathering is expected. And logically, here, most strongest mineralogical evidences of weathering we find. So why maximum values of supposedly weathering coefficients are found in B horizons, in spodic horizons of podzol, and in BT horizons, clay alluvial horizons of alphisols, luvisols, and retisols. We think that clay alluviation is responsible for these high values. If clay is alluviated to BT horizon, it means from geochemical viewpoint that here arrive components which are enriched in aluminium and much more poor in silicon and especially alkali and earth alkali elements like sodium, potassium. And because of that, and not because of weathering, this horizon is enriched in aluminium, and thus the values of these coefficients grow. Now you could say maybe it is not important if alluviation or weathering are responsible for the indexes. For us, it is important paleoclimatic signal. However, we should take into account that alluviation has its own relation with bioclimatic condition, which don't coincide with weathering. For example, clay alluviation is quite strong not only in really humid environments, but also in semi-humid ones. In what is earlier called gray forest soils. Now they are luvic phaeozems. Alluviation is quite strong, whereas weathering is quite modest. And climate is already not that humid, that in case of luvisols. Even worse, strong clay alluviation could take place in soils like Solonets, which could develop in dry steppe environment under semi-arid conditions, where weathering is very low. However, alluviation could be quite strong. So we think that direct interpretation of this index in this way is quite complicated. The the elevation and clay elevation, the same applies for podzol, because in this case, BS horizon has high values of weathering coefficients, not because of weathering, but because of elevation of complexes of aluminium and iron with humus, and their precipitation in form of coatings on the material, on the cause material of BS horizon. Again, this is not the signal of weathering. And again, elevation of these components have their own regularities, different from the regularities of weathering. And we could make the list of soil forming processes which influence these geochemical coefficients much longer. For example, very often the accumulation of biogenic silica in soils is forgotten, especially when coefficients related to silicon are calculated. And this accumulation could be quite large, and it mostly concentrates opaline particles, phytoliths, and means silicon in the upper horizon. Of course, influencing also geochemical indexes related to silicon. All this, what we say, is applied to a normal post-sedimentary pedogenesis, and is related only to pedogenetic processes. Everything even complicates more when we consider the possibility of sedimentation processes, their fluctuations along the sequence, and especially the possibility of pedosedimentation, a redeposition of soil material. For example, in loess paleosol sequences, it is well known that intensity of winds often changes, and particle size distribution, particle size composition of loess layers, of sedimentary loess layers, could vary. If particle size composition varies, then also mineralogical composition varies. We all know from the basic works on sedimentology that typically different size fractions have different mineralogy. For example, finer silt fractions are enriched in phyllosilicates, coarser fractions are enriched in quartz. All this will influence mineralogical composition of the sediment, and of course, geochemical composition, and then geochemical indexes. But especially interesting situation we could find when soil materials are redeposited, for example, in colluvial and alluvial sequences. Let me present you some results from the research we did with Maria and also with Elizabeth on the profile originally found by Svetlana Sychova. And I think this is our last joint paper which we published together with Professor Targulian. Another chance to remember him. This is the case of complete profile of amine soil corresponding to isotope stage 5E. In the center of East European plain, in a loess colluvial paleosol sequence, the advantage of this case is that we have a complete profile of paleosol. Not only B horizon is preserved, as in many cases in loess sequences, but also alluvial horizon, and even small humus horizon, and even charred litter. And we have micromorphological evidences that A horizon is really a horizon, a humus accumulative horizon with some biological activity. Alluvial horizon has its typical lenticular structure and redoxomorphic features. Transitional horizon combines alluvial and illuvial material, and in lower BT horizon we have nice illuvial clay coatings. So, complete profile. And granulometric characteristics and clay mineralogy is typical for a luvisol or retisol. Alluvial horizons are poor in clay and detonate extractable iron, which accumulates in the illuvial horizons, and clay mineral composition, maximum kaolinite, and some hydroxy interlayered vermiculites in alluvial horizon, and a lot of smectites in the BT and C horizons. So, and now we pass to the indexes. Well, before that, something most important for which I included this profile. Above this soil, this is this charred liter, this is A horizon, this is E horizon. There are colluvial layer. In the upper colluvial layer, we recognize some evidences of redeposited A horizon. In the lower colluvial layer, and in the upper colluvial layer, redeposited BT horizon. Quite logical, this is usual colluvial sequence when first material of upper horizon is redeposited, and then it is covered with the material of redeposited underlying B horizons. And now, tatam, weathering indexes. This is the profile, complete profile of buried soil. Again, we have maximum values of indexes, most weathered in commas material in BT horizons, especially in lower BT3 horizon, and very low level in E horizon. This contradiction we already discussed, but now let's go to colluvial horizons. Colluvial BT horizon has quite high values corresponding to BT horizon, quite logical, but now we should take into account that this is not because in situ weathering, this is because of a redeposition of pre-existing soil. So if we take it as a direct paleoclimatic weathering and paleoclimatic indicator, we would be quite wrong. We could think that this layer is quite weathered, indicating warm and humid climate, whereas this colluvium corresponds to early Würmian, means late isotope stage 5 conditions, which were already quite cold and with quite harsh climate. All this we present to you to something as warning about unconditional use of indexes, of geochemical indexes. Of course, we do not deny their use or reject their use at all. But we think that in each case, they should be accompanied by detailed paleogenetic and sedimentological analysis, which really could explain the differences in the values. And also, we would like to remind you that, for example, these indexes which we discuss here started their use with this paper of Nesbitt and Young, and you see that in this case, these indexes were applied to very old contexts, very ancient Proterozoic sediments and weathering mantles. There, of course, when we don't have other instruments of paleopedological, sedimentological, and other types of analysis, practically geochemistry is left one of the few tools for environmental and paleopedological reconstruction. Their use is fully justified and accepted. But afterwards, when all these indexes are transferred to much more recent contents, where we have a lot of other properties, they're straightforward and I would say primitive, limited use, limited just to one type of process and very reduced interpretation, we think is already inadequate. I think this is all to start the discussion, what we would like to share with you. And maybe